This is Friday, the 23rd of April. This is American history. We're going to look at the Nixon administration in this particular lesson. In 1968, it was a very close election. Now, it was a contentious primary, and the Democrats are going to choose Hubert Humphrey as their standard bearer. But many of the Democrats are opposed to the war, and they follow Eugene McCarthy. Other Democrats feel that Humphrey's civil rights stand has caused problems, and they back George Wallace. The Republicans, though, are united. They're united behind Richard Nixon. Now, we know that Nixon had been Eisenhower's vice president. We know that Nixon had gotten into trouble in '52 when he was accused of taking campaign funds and using them for his own use. He made a speech called the Checker speech because he talks about his kid's dog Checker, and this seemingly saved his position. He lost in '60 to Kennedy, an election which he said was rigged. He lost again in '62 the California governorship to Ed Brown. He became angry and he blamed the reporters and told them they would not have Nixon to kick around anymore. But in 1967, Nixon reemerged, saying that he was backed by the silent majority. Now, the silent majority, he said, were those who had been turned off by the protest of the Vietnam War. Nixon pledged that if elected, he had a plan to end the Vietnam War. Nixon's plan was nothing more than that Lyndon Johnson's plan of Vietnamization. Vietnamization is where the Americans stepped back and let the South Vietnamese army take a bigger role in the war. The war had brought about a great deal of protest. Most of those who protested the war did not trust Richard Nixon. Those who protested were a part of a bigger movement. They called themselves the counterculture. They were those who wanted to drop out from society. In the end, these people became known as hippies. It was a group that opposed the culture of the day. They would say that their parents were square. Their parents didn't understand what was truly going on. The hippies are going to have music that reflected their idea of turn on and drop out. Now, it is during Nixon's first administration that we are going to have a music festival that emulates what the hippies were thinking of. This festival became known as Woodstock. This particular video deals with Woodstock. After an increase of fighting in 1970, Nixon is going to order the invasion of Cambodia. Now, it was supposed to be a secret, but there were no secrets in the Vietnam War, and soon the nation learned of the U.S. Army in Cambodia, seemingly expanding the war. Nixon went on national TV to explain himself, but he got some of the details wrong, and many Americans believed that we were escalating the war. Now, on Kent State, in the state of Ohio, a massive protest is going to develop. The governor of Ohio is going to send in the National Guard. The National Guard of Ohio are going to fire live bullets into the crowd of students. 4 of the students are going to be killed. Here is a CNN report of the Kent State massacre. During the first administration, Edward Shore of CBS News is going to break a story which he calls the Pentagon Papers. Now, the United States military had done an analysis of what was going on in Vietnam. And the writer of the analysis said that no way, no how could the military win. Now, of course, we knew this in 1966, but the war continued on. Tens of thousands of American lives were lost. The Nixon administration is going to go to court to try to block the publication of the Pentagon Papers. Nixon threatened to arrest Shore, writers of the New York Times. The media took Nixon to court, and the Supreme Court is going to back the media over Nixon. Here is a video that deals with this court case, the U.S. versus Nixon. President Kennedy had pledged that the U.S. would put a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. During Nixon's first administration, astronauts will orbit the moon, proving that we could get a spacecraft from Earth to the moon and back. This is the most duplicated photograph in the history of the world. This is called Earthrise. In July of 1969, astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first American to walk on the moon. He was soon followed by his partner, Buzz Aldrin. The United States is the only country to land man on the moon. A total of 12 men from the United States have walked on the moon. Here is a story about this day in history. By 1972, the number of troops in Vietnam had decreased, but the amount of bombing of North Vietnam had increased. The peace process with the North, begun in Johnson's administration, continued. Now, the American representative was Henry Kissinger. He is the gentleman here on the right side of the photograph. Nixon had proposed lowering taxes, but the spending on the war continued. This produced a sluggish economy. The output stayed the same, but inflation was beginning to rise. Economists call this stagflation. When Congress began to withhold money for the Vietnam War, Nixon began to take money from domestic and social programs and place them into the defense budget. Various minority groups are going to challenge the Nixon administration in court. The Supreme Court agrees that Nixon must spend the money the way Congress suggested. By 1972, with the war in Vietnam still going on, various Democratic groups began to prepare for the upcoming election. I think this would probably be a pretty good place for us to stop, because it is during these Democratic primaries that something is going to happen that will eventually unravel the Nixon administration.